Welcome to Open Heart with Lisa. I'm so glad that you've tuned in. And before I get started, I like to say this disclaimer. I want you to know what Open Heart with Lisa is and what it is not. Open Heart with Lisa is not a therapy session with a psychiatrist or a psychologist or even a marriage counselor. I'm not either of those. But what I've decided to do was to have a candid conversation focusing primarily on relationships and life's issues from the male's perspective. I think his ability to express his feelings and his heart can afford us ladies an opportunity to look into his thought processes. So I'm going to have these unadulterated and provocative conversations, that's all they are, conversations, of gentlemen who will speak from their life's perspective. Now, ladies, I don't want you to get upset. Just understand that when these gentlemen talk, they're not talking about all women are this, all women are that. That's not what they're saying. They're talking about their personal experience. They're not women bashing. So another thing, they're not talking about me and they're not talking about you. I want you to also know that my guests come on and they are anonymous. So if you've been listening, you've known or if you've listened to my previous conversation with Henry from New York. That's what I've decided to call him. On the previous conversation, we spoke about should dating be held to the same standards as marriage, and we spoke about that, and we spoke about the money aspect. Today I want to talk to Henry once again. Should dating be held to the same standards as marriage when we're talking about sex? Now, this gets a little complicated and a little sensitive because if dating shouldn't be held to the same standards as marriage because we're not married, you didn't go before God, there's no covenant, there's no commitment, there's no paperwork, we're not legally bound, are we to expect and put the pressure on each of us that we should have a monogamous relationship? Is that even right? Do I, as a woman, have a right to say to someone who is not my husband, I just want you to be intimate with me? Does he have a right to feel that way? I want to say something, Henry. I want to ask you.
Yes.
Do you think it would be good if when we, as a man and a woman, decides to see each other, they start the dating process, and then let's say they decide they want to have some type of relationship, that we sit down and talk about what is it that you expect from me? What is it when it comes to money, and what is it when it comes to sex? I find that there is no communication. I find that no one, from my experience and from friends that I know, no one's ever sat down and said, listen, I expect this from you. I don't expect you to be monogamous. I don't know anybody who really has those types of conversations. And I really think those conversations should be had because I've known many women who've really gotten hurt because the expectation of monogamy was there on their part. And obviously it wasn't there on the guys that they were dating because they slept with other women, and my girlfriends found out, or family members, and people were really upset and hurt. So, first of all, do you think that would be a good conversation to have, or have you ever had that conversation when you're dating somebody and you want to go into a relationship?
So let me ask you a question first. Is the conversation about monogamy, or is the conversation about having sex, period? Because those are two different conversations to me.
The conversation is about both.
It's about both.
Right.
Yeah, I think that the expectations there, again, you need to know what are the expectations, and knowing the expectations are extremely important. But talking about sex isn't always easy for couples to do. A lot of us have, at some point, we grew up, we had sex education somewhere, maybe high school or something. But really and truly, nobody ever taught us how to have a constructive conversation with a partner about having sex.
Well, a lot of us didn't even have that conversation in our own house with our parents. So,
right. and because when you're not able to openly talk about sexual preferences with your partner,
Mm-hmm.
It's inevitable that it may cause some bedroom problems.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if it causes bedroom problems, then that can lead to misdirected frustration. Now we get to the monogamy aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there's misdirected frustration, what tends to happen for either party is, and typically more on the male side, he thinks back to the person whom he had that was a better fit for him sexually, and may wonder. But for the couples who are uninhibited and can have these conversations and can really get down to it, I think it becomes advantageous for them, more advantageous than those who cannot have that constructive, collaborative conversation.
So, do you think that when you date or when you're in a relationship, do you expect the woman you're with to be monogamous?
Wow. I think if you ask any man that, of course the man is going to say yes, that's what he's expecting, but I believe that if a woman was to tell me differently, at least you give me an option as to whether I want to continue or to persist in the relationship, or, it gives me an option. I could appreciate her honesty if that's not where she is. I think if you ask any man, of course that's what his expectations are, yes.
Really? And so now since dating, or you feel dating should be held to the same standards of marriage, they are quite different. I wonder why we feel, and I'm just interested in knowing your viewpoint, I wonder why we feel that there should be a monogamous relationship.
Because
when we're not married.
Because
what do you? Mm-hmm.
Men in particular have egos, and our ego doesn't feel like no other man can do what we can do, be what we can be, and bring it the way that we can bring it. And so that our ego says to us she doesn't need anybody else. But our ego also says to us that she may not be enough for me either. So, we have to contend with that as well.
That's that schizophrenic. That's that schizophrenic mindset. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you want her to be monogamous, and there's a possibility that you may not be. Now, let's say then let me ask you a question, because this is where it gets like hairy. I know men who feel you should be monogamous, and I know men who are not monogamous. And this is where this to me is just so freaking funny and sad at the same time, because it's strange that you can put an expectation on a woman, and then your expectation is much different. And then if she finds out that you're doing, you're participating with another woman, and she gets hurt, it's almost as if she doesn't have a right to be hurt.
Well, teachers always, listen to this, Lisa, teachers always teach something that they don't sometimes do themselves. Teachers always teach. Preachers are very great at telling you what you should do, but at the end of the day, they don't do it. Mm-hmm. And I heard one preacher say, no, that doesn't mean I'm a hypocrite. It just means I'm a great teacher because I can teach you how to do it. So teachers oftentimes teachers teach something that they themselves don't do.
Okay, so and the problem with that is, like I'm telling you, there have been many women that I've known, were devastated when they found out that the boyfriends that they were with were participating in, some of the guys with multiple women. And if they found out, or if, let's say if one of my girlfriends would have been doing something, these guys would have dumped these girls so fast. Just to me, it's just unfair. And that's why sometimes this topic I find so provocative, and I've really been thinking about this. Should dating be held to the same standards of marriage? Because I think the stress that sometimes we put on each other and the demands and the expectations that we place on each other. Like for a man to feel that the woman he's with should not be with anybody, that's a lot of demand and expectation to put on a woman who's not your wife.
But hold on. I don't know that that's a lot of demand, and I don't know there's a lot of stress, because women naturally can pretty much honor that request naturally, because when you look at how the makeup of a man and the makeup of a woman, from creation, the makeup of a man is to be a hunter, and the makeup of a woman is to be a glory producer.
Well, let me tell you the pressure that it puts, though. Okay? So this is what I'm talking about, pressure. Because they want her, for some men, want her to act like a wife, right?
Okay.
In that aspect, even though he's not treating her the way a husband should treat her. So I want you to act like, even though we're not married, in this aspect now, I want you to make sure you're faithful to me. Now, I might do a couple of things on the side. The pressure that it puts on her is when she finds out and the devastation that happens. I've known some women, I mean, you're talking about broken and shattered after finding out certain things, when sometimes I feel if he were just to be honest, because then let her decide, listen, I care about you. I'm not ready to be monogamous. And then she has an opportunity to make up her mind and her decision what she wants to do. She could say, you know what, okay, that's not going to work for me. But don't put that expectation on her and you live your life totally different. And 9 times out of 10, she's going to find out. She becomes part of your collateral damage. Broken heart. Not only does she, the other person that you're with, and then there's a whole slew of folk that, you know, a lot of these gentlemen have been with 2, 3, 4 different people, and everybody's getting hurt. And this is what I want to ask you, too. I want to ask you this. You're a man. You're a man.
I hope so. I believe so. I looked in the mirror this morning. I hope I still am.
Well, I hope you haven't changed. But
yeah.
How do y'all not y'all? How do you deal with knowing that, okay, I care about woman A, but I'm going to sleep with woman B? Don't you care about how hurt woman A is going to be? Or you're just so caught up in the moment, you just have no regard for her feelings?
Okay, let me ask you a question, and I'm not condoning. Yeah. I'm not condoning it. I promise you, I'm not. And even when I made the comment about a teacher teaching and not always following his own practices, I wasn't saying he's right. Believe me, I wasn't. I was just making a point. And so, but let me ask you a question, and I preface again by saying I'm not condoning it. I think it's because young men sell drugs because they don't think they're going to ever get caught. Mm-hmm. And they're looking at being elusive and getting the high off of making the money. Mm-hmm. But in their minds, they don't feel like they're ever going to get caught. That's why they do it. Because if they felt like they were going to get caught and having to deal with the repercussions that come along with it, then they wouldn't do it, yes?
Right. Well, that's most people who do things who maybe they know they shouldn't do certain things, and they don't do it. Most people don't do things thinking they're going to get caught.
Well, you just answered your own question, why men do it, because men do that based off of thinking that they're not going to get caught, and they get caught up in, you know, the moment of it and the high of it, and the high of being able to hunt and get the prey and, you know, do the things that they feel that, you know, they want to do with the prey, and then keep it moving. They don't feel like they're going to get caught. That's why they do it. Or, you know, men, we don't feel like we're going to get caught.
Okay, so you don't feel like you're going to get caught, but is there a part of you that cares about the hurt and the pain that you will cause?
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
Let me put it like this: even the woman the new woman on the scene. Okay, I heard a gentleman say once, listen, well, as long as I'm honest and I let her know, you know, that we're doing this for whatever reason, I'm not looking for a relationship, then he felt that that was good enough. And I said to the gentleman, I said, but it's very hard to tell somebody not to care for you. Just because you sit down and have a conversation with her and you say to her, listen, we're just going to do this, and you're very clear with what your intentions are. You can't make another person control their feelings. And you know what I'm saying? So it's like there's no regard to the hurt that you can cause somebody. And I'm just trying to figure out, because see, that one thing right there, I just never understood. I understand people go to bed for whatever reason. I understand too that there's some women who they're not looking for an emotional connection. They do that for whatever reason they want to do it. Some people say, hey, we're two consenting adults. That's what some folks say. But you can run into somebody with whom you have no intentions of hurting. She winds up getting hurt. You're hurting 2 people, 3 people. Doesn't that ever get to the point where it bothers you? Because I'm just thinking that would bother me.
Well, since we're talking about marriage and dating, because some people say marriage is supposed to be, some people say marriage is supposed to be monogamous, and dating conveys no binding commitment. So I guess it depends, again, on the communication, between the 2 partners. Because if dating conveys no binding commitment. Based off of, I guess it's whose philosophy we buy into, then, there has to be an understanding there.
Well, there has to be an understanding, but I understand there has to be an understanding, but what I also understand is sometimes people can't control their emotions, and that's where the rubber hits the road, because we can sit down and talk all day, but sometimes the mind and the heart don't go and walk down the street together. The mind will say, hey, it is what it is. The heart will go off and do its own thing, and then you find that you start having feelings. And that happens a lot. Sometimes I notice this sometimes more so with women. I told a girlfriend of mine the other day, I said, boy, it'd have been great just to only have had sex with your husband, and then you have sex with no one else, because you could safeguard your heart. If you're, a certain type of woman. I understand some women can, hop around and they're cool, but if you're not that type of woman, you can find that you have had 3 or 4 boyfriends over a period of years, start loving people in a way that maybe you probably shouldn't have, because you've given so much of yourself, and then you look back in hindsight and say, man, I shouldn't have gotten connected in a certain way, because sometimes is it even worth it? If certain people have not and aren't going to become your husbands, and sometimes that once you're in 1 or 2 years, say, this is a great person, but I'm not going to marry them. And you give so much of yourself. And I think sometimes in giving so much of yourself, you're also losing so much of yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
Right?
I agree. I agree with that, but I just think that comes along with, this whole process. It does. It's a part of the process.
Well, okay, go ahead. You can say something.
I just believe that. There's an exchange that takes place as the longer you guys are together, the more comfortable you may become, and the more comfortable you become, the more you give, and the more you give, the more you lose of yourselves. Because you're giving so much of yourself because you've gotten comfortable with this person, and so I just think that it comes along with the process of dating, because most women, when they think about dating, they date with a purpose. Men don't always date with a purpose, in terms of the purpose for most women is to date to find their Romeo and to find the person whom they want to spend the rest of their lives with. That's not always the case for a lot of men. I'm not saying that a lot of men don't do that as well, but in particularly women are more conscious of that, so they date more with a purpose. And a lot of times women date with their head on top of their body. Men don't always date with the head that's on top of their body.
Yeah, they date with the lower head.
Absolutely. So
Excuse
women,
me, audience.
no, real talk. Women,
Yeah.
so women date with a purpose, and a lot of times they think it out, and once they get comfortable, they end up giving themselves a lot, and then they end up losing themselves. So I just think it comes along with the process.
Well, would you be able to date a woman who would say to you, "Listen, I like you a lot, and I would love to have a relationship with you, but I'm not going to have any kind of sexual exchange with you"?
Yeah, I would totally respect her for that. I would totally respect that. I mean, if that's where she is in her life and she wants to save herself, I'm definitely not going to be the one to try to make her go a different route than she's decided to take.
Now, would you go a different route with somebody on the side, and she not know about it?
Now that's a great question. No, really, that's a great question.
Right. I mean, you're still seeing her.
Possibly, but possibly, yes. Because I'm not gonna try to get her to advance into something that she's not willing to do. If she doesn't want to do it, fine. That doesn't mean that she's asking me to practice that and that, because I might even say, okay, if that's what you choose to do, I'm gonna totally respect that. Great, I respect you, but that doesn't mean that's where I'm at.
Well, that wouldn't mean, but even that, you see, I'm trying to tell you, because, let's talk about some men. That's why I think sometimes the best thing to do is keep your legs closed, because for some men, even if you are intimate, some men still will be intimate with other women. So in the end, you lose so much of yourself. Whereas, and I know some people are listening to this probably saying, "Oh, she's crazy. Why should a woman not be intimate?" Well, you be intimate or not intimate, but at the end of the day, not all men, and I'm not trying to say every man is seeing other people and having sex with other people. I'm not saying that, but there are those who do. Go ahead, Henry.
No, what I was going to say, sex is really just a call. That's a call that you and your partner have to make.
Right.
Before, sex before marriage is that call that you got to make with your partner before you guys, it's just something you guys have to discuss, and you have to make that call. Just, if that's the couples before they tie the knot, if they want to wait, if they don't want to wait until the honeymoon to know if things are going to work in the bedroom, and if they both agree that having sex before marriage is an important way to establish their basic level of sexual compatibility, and that's a call they got to make. And it depends on who you have this conversation with. Without having to get into the moral pros and cons of premarital sex, because people have their thinking and philosophy on that. That's great, but these pros and this premarital sex may not always be the case. And we live in a real world where people are doing it way before they get married now. And just because, and here's another thing you got to think about too, which is extremely important. Just because people have good sex and a lot of it before they get married doesn't mean it's going to be that way for their entire life.
Of course. Well, most of the time it changes. And when people get married, you find, especially when they have children. And it's so funny. I was thinking about something I said to someone the other day. They were talking about. I was talking about this topic to them, and I said, "Well, what I do know is sex is not the most important thing." And the person looked at me like I was crazy. I said, "No, it's not. There are many people who've gotten married and got divorced and had great sex, and they still got divorced."
Absolutely.
I said, and I think that we put so much emphasis on that we don't put emphasis on the other things that help make and keep relationship, friendship. A lot of us, speaking of this dating thing, we're so quick to, there are some women who don't look for a man to be her friend first. She's out looking for a boyfriend, ASAP. She doesn't want to have any friendship. She just want to meet him. In a month, they're in a relationship. And there's no foundation there. There's nothing. And I've just known for myself that there's nothing better than establishing for months a really good friendship with somebody and let your friendship build and your relationship then escalate into something else, because the underpinning of the relationship got to have a strong foundation. And there's some people, I've met some people, they've met somebody, next week they've had sex, they're in a relationship, they're not even friends. And certain people I know get upset when the guy has these other female friends and when she's not his friend. But they never started off as friends. They didn't know how to merge into a friendship because really it's more sexual, than anything. Matter of fact, what do you feel about that? Would you prefer, if you met a woman too, just want to ask you, to be intimate with her within the first 3 months? Or would you like to develop a friendship with her, let's say for 3-6 months, and then see where you go from there? What would be your ideal situation?
I don't know that there is a formula that's correct for that, because I think the person makes the difference. So whether it's 3 days or 3 months or 3 years, I don't know that there's a correct formula, and I think that you have to base it off of the individual. If it's 3 days, because an article just came out. I think it was in the Huffington Post I read last year. There was an article that, people are now having one-night stands, and one-night stands are turning into marriages.
I heard about that.
So, think times have changed. People have changed. Concepts are totally different than the way that they used to be. So there's no clear, concise answer that I can give you on that. I think the person or the persons makes all the difference in the world. It could be 3 days, and we could spend the rest of our lives together. It could be 3 months.
I would love the Huffington Post to do a survey on about, let's say, 20 couples who met, had sex, and got married, and in 10 years see where they are, if they're still married. Or if they're married, laid and lonely in the house in 2 separate rooms, married in name only, or if they have a very loving relationship. I mean, I think everybody has to know what works best for them. Like, I know me really well. And for me, I love friendships. I love to get to know the individual, the heart of the person, the thought process. I like depth. That's what I like. The other, somebody else might like something else.
Yeah, depth comes over a period of time. You don't get to know somebody it's over a period of time. Intimacy comes from 2 words, comes from in time. So in time, you can become intimate in your mind, you can become intimate physically, mentally, emotionally. So everything takes time. But it's up to you to understand, the time that it's going to take. Some people can be on a fast track. It just, again, that's what I said. I don't believe that there's no clear, concise answer for that. I think it's the people, the persons involved that makes the difference.
So Henry, we're getting ready to close.
Okay.
So the way you live your life, because I like everybody to speak from their own personal perspective, is you deal with women individually, and you see where it goes from there. Yeah,
I have practices and protocols, like I told you earlier.
P&P.
P&P. And so, I just explore that and what's working in those, in that instance. I like to be able to because routines don't always, because you become so regimented. Just so regimented until it just becomes just a routine, and then you fall into a rut. The root word for routine is rut. So you don't want that. You want to keep it lively. You want to keep it exciting. You want to keep that adventure aspect. So you let the person make the difference, and then you bring your protocol and your practices based off of the person. So there's your third P, And I think that makes all the difference in the world.
Well, you know what? Thank you, Henry. We got to close, and thank you for the P&P, the practices and the protocols from Henry from New York. Henry got a book coming out, Practices and Protocols from the Henry's Perspective. Henry, we got 2 more interviews to do with you, but I want to thank everybody so much. Thank you, Henry, for your insight. Henry always knows how to bring it. Thank everybody for listening to Open Heart with Lisa, where his heart matters. Have a blessed day. Thank you.
Thank you.